Hello, this is Organization with Olu. We're now going to talk about the J curve. Stick around. I think you're going to like what I've got for you. Right now, what I'm going to do is share my screen. Hi guys, please make sure you've watched my first video on the J curve. It's really important. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're just going to explore a little bit more of the J curve. Then I'm going to do a couple more videos of the Marshall learner. The reason why I'm separating them is because students tend to get very confused. Marshall learner refers to the elasticity, so I'll go a lot more into that in my separate two videos, and then we'll put it all together. Okay, so I want you to try to answer a few of these questions. Okay, so from your understanding of depreciation, explain what an appreciation of a currency is. Okay, give an example. Briefly explain what is meant by the J curve effect in two paragraphs. Use the example of the Robinson's family in video one. So please make sure you go back to the first video and watch that. Okay. Then explain what is meant by the price elasticity of demand. What do you think is meant if the price elasticity of demand was perfectly inelastic? Okay. Hopefully that would challenge you a bit, but it's not that difficult. So let's go straight into the J curve, which I did in the first video. Okay. So what we're just simply going to do, we're just going to explore this in a little bit more detail, because it's really important when you're trying to do this diagram. You really need to take your time and make sure you've done it in the correct manner. Okay, so for example, if we're talking about the UK or the US, it should always be in deficit, because those countries, UK and the US, have been persistently in deficit for many years. So that's why I started 12 million. As you can see, you've got the current account in deficit here, and you've got the current account in surplus here. So I started in deficit. Okay, very important that you need to apply to the case study. If it's the UK, you need to start it well below in the deficit, well below the surplus. It shouldn't be anywhere near the surplus because we're in deficit. So that's why I started 12 billion in deficit, for example. Okay, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get to point B before it possibly can get to point C. And I explain that because the price elasticity of demand is very low, and in some cases, perfectly inelastic. What that means is that the drop in price is not going to bring about any change in demand straight away, and especially in the short term, because of the time lag effects. I explained in terms of like contracts. If you go back to the first video, we talked about the Robinson family. They've already paid, they're already in contract. They can't break their contract. And they're gonna have to wait maybe till next year until they book another holiday, and then they can benefit from the drop in price. Okay, so we explained that. So the initial term in the short run is going to be, it's actually going to get a lot worse, because if you think about it, you're receiving less money for your exports because your exports are now cheaper. Okay, but the same reason why you can't benefit from that is the same reason why you're stuck with the imports. You have to continue to pay in for the imports. Okay, you can't easily change. You might not be able to get substitutes. You might be in contracts. You can't suddenly stop your imports. So you have to pay. You're paying a lot more for your imports, but you're receiving a lot less for your exports. The value of your exports is a lot less, and therefore you might end up getting your current account might get worse, and you might end up with point B getting worse in the short run. So hopefully you understand that. And over time, hopefully you get to point C. Please bear in mind, I'm still in deficit. Depreciation alone is not going to solve the UK's problems. We have underlying issues in terms of things, supply side policies, productivity issues. There's so many issues that are responsible for us being in deficit. Having a depreciation should help to a certain extent, but it's not suddenly going to put you in surplus. So please make sure you don't do that. You must always make sure your J curve still is under the surplus line. You must not, it's under the zero line, the balance line. Okay, it must always be negative. Okay, so it shouldn't be anywhere near the surplus. So that's why it ends up in point C. Here, you have a balanced budget. This would be obviously be zero. That's a balanced budget that you have here. Okay, so make sure that your J curve always ends about here, guys. Very important that it ends about here. Okay, because it shows you understand. If you draw your J curve and it goes over the zero line into surplus, it shows maybe you don't particularly understand this economics very well. Okay, so you have to be really, really careful in an exam. So make sure you pay attention to how you draw your J curve. And also do not forget this formula: AD is equal to C plus G plus I plus X minus M net exports. So hopefully when we get to point C, X is going to hopefully increase, go up. Okay. And hopefully we've gone beyond the short term. We're now in long term. We can now look for substitutes. We can now maybe go to other supplies that gives us cheaper imports. So again, that should help by reducing the value of the imports as well, increasing the value of the exports because people are purchasing more exports from us because our exports are cheaper, and we're reducing the purchase of imports, or we're buying less imports or buying more cheaper imports if we're able to substitute the imports. But we'll go a lot more. We've got a lot more into that because we'll talk about the Marshall Lerner, the elasticity of demand. Very, very important, the price elasticity of demand, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. But I just wanted you to understand that. So when you're talking about the J curve, pay attention to it. You have the time here on this axis. Make sure your current account surplus is here above the zero line. Make sure your deficit is below the zero line. Look at the country. Okay, if it's, for example, Saudi Arabia, it's going to be in the surplus. Okay, if it's UK or if it's USA, it's going to be below. And make sure when you do the J curve, it still stays below. Okay, and that shows you a top economic student. All right. So hopefully this benefited you, and we're going to explore the Marshall Learner in the next couple of videos, and we're going to tie it all together, and then you're going to be able to smash it. Okay. So please like, share, and subscribe. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bye bye.